this video I'm going to talk about the 2016 video game Inside in great detail. This video might be titled as a review, but I find the mysteries in the game way too interesting not to talk about. So in order to do that I will have to spoil almost the entire game in the process. If you haven't played the game yet, I highly recommend you to do that before watching any further, since I will most likely ruin the experience for you with this video. And for me personally, this was a game I was very glad I experienced completely blind. However, the first half of the video is going to be more focused on the review side of things, while the latter half is more about the analysis and speculation. So I will give a separate warning later on in the video when shit really hits the fan in terms of spoilers. Danish development studio Playdead, founded in 2006, released their first game Limbo in 2010. Limbo was a side-scrolling puzzle platformer with simplistic but stylish black and white visual style. I personally liked Limbo a lot, and the game was overall very well received. Right after Limbo released, Playdead started to work on their second game, Inside. I got my first glimpse on Inside during E3 2014, where the game got announced, accompanied with a mysterious trailer that made me very eager to play it after liking Limbo quite a bit. 2016, 2 years after the game was announced, and 6 years after the release of Limbo, Inside was finally released. The game starts in a very vague manner. No music, no introduction cutscenes, no dialogue. Just a nameless, voiceless boy who takes a small slide down the hill and the gameplay starts. There is no explanation on who you are and how you got into these dark woods. But unfortunately, you're not alone. In terms of gameplay, Inside is rather simple. You can move around, jump and interact with different objects. Some more gameplay elements are introduced in certain sections in the game that take place underwater, for example, but the controls remain very simple throughout the game. There's no combat of any kind involved, and just like in Limbo, most of the time in the game is spent by doing some slight platforming and puzzle solving. While I do feel that Limbo's puzzles were quite a bit harder than the ones you will find in Inside, I still had more fun time with the puzzles in Inside because they feel more organic with the game world. What I mean by that is that the puzzles in Inside feel like they're not there just for the sake of having a puzzle for the player to solve, but also fit the world Inside takes place in, and feel like they were there for a reason before the boy ever stepped his foot in the given scenario. Inside also takes the advantage of three-dimensional spaces, despite being a side-scrolling game, so things can happen both in the forefront and the background of player's view, creating some more interesting scenarios and puzzles that wouldn't work as well in a two-dimensional setting, even though the gameplay never breaks outside of the two-dimensional control scheme. While the gameplay in Inside is perfectly serviceable, the gameplay is not the thing that makes Inside special for me. I usually gravitate my interest towards longer games where gameplay is the king and there's at least some combat system involved. So why did Inside, that is very short game with quite simplistic gameplay and next to no replay value, make such a big impact on me? Some of the more obvious things Inside does well that I want to mention before diving into the deep end of the spoiler territory are the art style, the animation and the sound design of the game. The low polygon art style of Inside combines both simplistic and realistic elements, keeping the character models rather simplistic and slightly more caricatured compared to the scenery that looks often more realistic. This art style combined with very vague use of color and how the lighting is handled in the game leads to a visual style that is obviously not aiming to be photorealistic, but it's realistic enough not to look outlandish either, and would suggest that the game takes place in the real world instead of some made-up fantasy world. The art style is supported by the incredibly impressive animation work. The way the boy stumbles and nervously looks around while running, jumping or climbing away from danger, or just all the different death animations in the game, are all animated beautifully and also have a lot of subtleties to them. The soundtrack of the game is often very subtle and lurking in the background, lending more of its strength when it feels appropriate to the situation, often giving more room for the sound effects to shine. Nothing in the game sounds or looks out of place, and as an audio-visual experience it is masterfully handled game. I always felt that there's something special about the sound design of the game, but I was never quite able to put my finger on what that something was, until I saw the sound designer of the game Martin Stig Anderson's presentation at the GDC 2016 about how the game, or at least many of the areas in the game, were actually designed from the ground up with the terms of audio, so that the game's soundscape is always responsive despite the player's actions, providing a soundscape that always flows perfectly with the gameplay. I found that presentation to be very fascinating, and I recommend you to check it out if you're at all interested about that sort of stuff. This would be the part where I give my last spoiler warning for those who still want to experience this game, because from here on out I will be mostly talking about the setting and the story of the game. Inside is a mystery. A mystery that grows bigger and more disturbing while we progress deeper into the game world. So the most natural way for me to analyze and talk about the game story is to first go through the game section by section, gathering my thoughts and observations, and try to conclude with more comprehensive analysis in the end. In the dark forest where the game starts, you hide as you see people wearing masks who are assisting more people to the back of the truck. These masked people quickly take notice of you and will chase you with the help of their dogs. At first I thought that they were just trying to capture you, since their guns only shoot some kind of tranquilizer darts, but after seeing how violently the dogs will rip you apart if they catch up to you, maybe they are just trying to stop you by any means necessary. As for why you are being chased by these masked people is unclear, at least for now. When you manage to escape the people chasing you and exit the forest area, you'll make your way through the cornfield where you see these little chicks walking around you and following you. These chicks work as an element for a puzzle later, but there's also something else I want to talk about related to them a bit later on. Soon after, you take a leap of faith into a pile of dead pigs that seem to be infested with some sort of maggots. One of the seemingly dead pigs suddenly wakes up and starts to chase you. If you get the pig to run into a wall, it will stun, giving you an opportunity to pull the maggot out of its rear end, calming the pig down. Now you can use the pig as a platform to access the first mind control puzzle of the game. These mind control puzzles will appear throughout the game, and mind control in general is a big theme in the game. By placing your head into these mind control helmets, you can move the nearby humanoid creatures. These creatures clearly do not have a mind of their own, and without being controlled they're just hunched there motionless. For the lack of a better word, let's call them puppets from now on. In this particular puzzle, you first use the puppets to cooperate and open the gate together that is blocking half of the puppets, and afterwards use all the puppets to collapse the ceiling of the building, making a ramp for the boy to proceed forward. The puzzle here is really simple, but works well for presenting how the concept of the mind control works, since the puzzles will evolve a bit in complexity later on. Soon you'll see a bunch of people standing in line like the mindless puppets in the background next to a truck. Are these the same people we saw inside the truck before? And if that's the case, what happened during their drive here, since they weren't standing like the puppets back then? When you enter the next building, you run into a flock of birds. However, unlike the chicks before, they fly away from you. After solving a couple of more puzzles, you find yourself in the rooftops of a city area. This destroyed sign with big letters is important, but I'll come back to it later on. In the background, you can see massive amount of puppets marching in line while being under heavy surveillance of security cameras and the masked people. After a small section where you avoid being spotted by some security robots, this suddenly happens. You are dropped in the middle of some sort of behavior testing process for puppets, and have to act like one of them by repeating simple tasks in order to avoid being detected. There's a couple of interesting things to point out in this scene. As before, the puppets are under a surveillance of the masked people, but this time we also see a crowd of masked people who don't seem to be working there, including women, children, and even a baby. Whatever is happening is being proudly showcased to these people, even though some of the children seem to be a bit scared of what's going on. Could this be some sort of bring your family to work day? Or are these people perhaps considering a purchase, and the puppets are something that the masked men are marketing? This all seems rather top secret, so maybe the masks are worn to protect everyone's identity, or perhaps to differentiate real people from the puppets. One other detail that struck me as odd in this section is that the masked men are apparently not able to tell you apart from the other puppets, even though you're the only child that appears in the line here, and there's no child puppets anywhere in the game. Well, at least in this form, but we'll get to that later on as well. If you play your part well, the masked people do not spot you, but eventually your cover is blown by a dog and you have to escape. The next puzzle you run into demonstrates that the mind control can pass through multiple beings. While the boy controls one of the puppets, that puppet can control another puppet as well by using another mind control helmet. After a couple of short water sections, you arrive to some rooftops again. You can see some kind of functional railways in the distance. What follows is a section where you avoid being detected by surveillance lights. In the background, you see another train transporting a huge amount of puppets somewhere. Soon you'll find yourself under the city and get spotted by a pack of dogs, in a thrilling section where you need to remove planks of wood from a sealed out doorway to fit yourself through while avoiding the dogs. This section was terrifying to me first time around and caused some real panic when I realized removing one of the planks isn't enough and seeing how brutal death awaited me if I fail. After escaping the dogs, you sneak past two men paying their attention to some kind of tape recorder. Unfortunately, you cannot hear what they are listening to. These men are not wearing masks, but still seem to be acting on their own will. This seems to be a section of the facility where outsiders have no business entering. With the help of a small submarine that you steal from the men, you enter a large flooded area. You're forced to leave the submarine in order to activate a button that opens a door for it. While doing this, you pass through an area with heavy vegetation and similar pods that were all around the first forest area in the beginning of the game. The area seems artificial, since you can clearly see it's under a ceiling, perhaps it's some sort of a greenhouse. When you make your way back to the submarine, you see a glimpse of something moving in the water with you. After a short while, you run into this water creature again. At first glance, it looks rather friendly, but it soon becomes apparent that it's just afraid of the light of the submarine. Turn the light away from it and it will violently break through the submarine window and drown the boy. This creature is very interesting since it has a childlike body structure, very similar to the boy, and acts differently from the puppets, despite being very obviously not a human. After escaping the water creature, you enter a large area with the biggest puzzle of the game. The puzzle takes place in 3 different floors, accessed with an elevator. There are puppets in all the floors and you need to navigate through all of them to get 20 puppets to stand in a designated spot to get huge doors in the room open. There's something banging heavily on the door on the other side. It's quite a long puzzle, but there's a couple of interesting things I want to point out that happened during it. Prior to this part of the game, all the mind control helmets have been stationary and tied to something with a cable. But now, for the first time, one of them snaps apart from the cable, revealing that the mind control helmet works all the same while moving from its original position. This enables you to move around the area and lead the puppets behind you wherever you go. Another interesting detail is that we find one seemingly dead puppet who doesn't respond to the presence of the boy, even when he's wearing the mind control helmet. This means that the puppets can indeed die, even though they seem completely unaffected when falling long distances. That would surely kill any normal human. Of course, there's a possibility that this is not a puppet at all, but a human who died here. But he's dressed in the similar factory worker outfit as any other puppet in the area. His body is found in the upper section of the building, so that might imply that he wears some sort of a manager of the section, but it's impossible to tell for sure. What comes after you get the doors open is one of the coolest parts in the game. We find out what was banging on the door from the outside is a massive shockwave released from the distance in steady pattern. If the boy gets caught in the shockwave, he will explode to pieces. In order to avoid that, you need to hide behind different sturdy surfaces. While this is a very cool section to play through, I do not understand it. Some people have theorized that the shockwave, whatever it is what drove Earth to apocalypse. After all, the game world does seem rather post-apocalyptic at times. But I don't think this is the case. Why does the shockwave only happen in this area? Why are there crash test dolls in the shockwave area implying that the shockwave was tested on them, but the shockwave is still tearing apart the surrounding area? And if the shockwave was created for a purpose, why does it completely destroy an elevator later on? Some stuff here really doesn't seem to add up, but let's move on for now. After you survive the elevator crash, you enter another flooded water section. This time I actually felt terrified to go into the water again after being chased by the water creature before. And god damn it! You have no other choice but to enter the water where the creature is, but luckily it just floats there motionless. Nope, it's still trying to kill you. At first glance, this would look like the same water creature that attacked you before, but it has some sort of cables attached to it and has slightly different body structure, so it seems to be a different one from before. The creature cannot exit the water, so to get through the next section you need to bait it by entering the water and covering some ground above the surface before it gets to you. After escaping the water creature again, a very important scene in the game happens, and I'm going to show it in its full entirety before I say anything more about it.
Somebody once told me.
Just kidding. This scene over here is probably the one that raises the most questions in the game. So the water creature drowned the boy, attached some sort of cable into its chest, and moments later the boy wakes up. From this point on you can breathe underwater. There are some more stuff I want to bring up about this section later on, but it's crucial for you to see what happens later on in the game for me to do so. All I can say is that this part made me literally utter the words "what the fuck" out loud on my first playthrough, and to be honest, this part still confuses the shit out of me. Fishes are flocking around you like the little chicks at the farm area, and you can see silhouettes of disfigured creatures attached to some wires in the forefront. If it wasn't apparent before, when you swim through the following area you can see that it used to be some kind of laboratory where these malformed humanoid looking creatures were either created or were subjects to some kind of tests. While you can now breathe underwater, you're certainly not invincible, which can be proven in this next section with the huge underwater turbines. When you get to the surface, you go through some kind of dump for human bodies. Remember when I said that the game gets more twisted the deeper we go? After avoiding getting detected by another surveillance light, you enter a rather strange room. It's filled with some kind of black boxes connected with cables to malformed humanoid creatures hanging upside down in water. But the water is also somehow upside down, covering the roof half of the room, completely defying gravity. When you figure out your way into the water and get a closer look, you can see that there are worms sticking out of the creatures, similar worms that you pulled out of Pig's ass a couple of hours ago. You make your way up a floor or two and hide while you see a forklift taking away a cage of puppets. An interesting detail here that has always bothered me is that while the forklift is doing its business, you can see a man with a child in the doorway waiting. This child is wearing a baseball cap that is exactly the same color as the shirt of the boy we play as. We see no other people wearing hats or too much color in the game for that matter. So this detail has always bothered me and makes me wonder if it bears any significance, or is it just me thinking things too far? The boy with the baseball cap even takes a quick last look in the warehouse before the gates close. Next up is a puzzle section where you manipulate water defying gravity like the room before with the creatures. For me personally, this puzzle was the hardest one in the game and resembles me most of Limbo out of all of them, because it's one of those puzzles that feels really tricky at first, but once you figure it out you feel really stupid about yourself. You find another room filled with the creatures hanging upside down in the water, but this time you can raise the water and free the creatures. Interesting thing here is that they will follow you even without the mind control helmet on your head. You use the creatures to get you around to the next section and you find yourself in a room with a huge window. Some people are running somewhere in the distance. The surrounding areas do not look destroyed anymore and you can find office spaces that seem to be in use just moments before. The following part is my favorite in the whole game. You can see that some test subjects are observed here in the similar glass cabinets that we saw in the flooded section. But where are all the people? At this point I was sure this guy is running after me to catch me, but no, he doesn't care about the boy and just runs past us. Next you see where all the people ran off to. They are all gathered around staring at something that is on the other side of the glass of a huge tank. The boy can also see what is on the other side, but us, the player, cannot. I have to raise my hat to the developers of this moment here that works wonders in building anticipation. What on earth is on the other side? After a small gameplay section we get to find out, but this is one of those moments I'm going to just show in its full entirety. What we found on the other side of the glass was this huge organism that is like a bunch of human bodies melted together. After pulling out the mind control looking devices out of it, it sucked the boy inside of it, and now you are playing as the monster, making your escape, destroying everything in your path. This moment just absolutely blew me away. It's such an unexpected turn of events that both changes the tone of the game more action-oriented, offering some really cool scenes, but also turns the tides from being hunted to becoming a force of which everyone runs away from. I want to also point out that the way the monster moves around, reacts to the environment and the noises it makes are all handled perfectly. Huge amount of the developer's time must have went into creating this monstrosity, and it shows in every aspect of it. Eventually, the monster ends up in a room where a crowd of people are gathered around in the shadows like some sort of cult, and the monster gets captured. You're able to rip apart the wall of your prison, however, and make your escape breaking through a wall that sends the monster for a long tumble down the hill, ending up on a beach near motionless, as the credits roll. For real this time. So, what the hell? It's time to start speculating. Since the game is based around mind control, we start opening this puzzle by trying to figure out who is controlling who in the game, and most importantly, how. Clearly the scientists have conducted different kind of experiments on mind control in multiple laboratories. These laboratories are numbered, but it's sometimes hard to tell where exactly one lab ends and other one starts, since most of them have already been destroyed. But I feel it has been gradual progress, starting from the more basic experiments and expanding from there, getting more and more ambitious and complex. I think the first experiments were done on the farming area we see in the start of the game, and the source of mind control was first found in these parasitic worms that infest the pigs in there. Why I think this is because when the pig attacks you, it no longer acts hostile at all when the parasite is removed from its behind, suggesting that the parasite was influencing its behavior. This similar aggressive behavior is seen in the long-haired water creatures. Perhaps they were too aggressive for the scientists to handle and destroyed the labs, causing them to flood. Some have theorized that these parasitic worms link Inside to Limbo, and have gone even as far as to say that the boy who we play as in Inside is the same boy we play in Limbo, and that Inside is a prequel to Limbo. But personally, I don't buy that. While there are some similarities between the games for sure, I don't think those little similarities are enough to link the games with each other in any other way than as a little callback for the fans of Limbo. So yeah, I think these parasitic worms were the most primitive form of the mind control, and the scientists started to experiment on them. These types of mind controlling parasites do actually exist in real nature, taking control over snails for example. First experiments were done on pigs, probably because pigs' anatomy is rather close to humans, or then the parasites were found in the pigs in the first place, and the scientists realized that they can be used on humans as well. We also know that there are different kinds of mind control, the one that needs the mind control helmet to work and the other one that doesn't. So what differentiates these two types of mind control? In the city section we saw huge amount of puppets being controlled with no apparent mind control helmets in sight. So what exactly is controlling them? The most obvious candidate for something that could mind control this many puppets at the same time would be the monster that we will refer to as the huddle from now on. The huddle even looks a bit like a brain, so it would be quite fitting if the huddle is some sort of a mother brain for the puppets, and was created and enslaved by the scientists for this exact purpose. One of the most accepted theories out there is that the boy we play as has never had free mind of his own, and was controlled from the start by the huddle that only used the boy as a tool to its escape. There's a couple of problems with this theory, but I want to explain why people believe this because there's a good reason for it. You can find these secret orbs all around the game that are hidden off the beaten path. Some of these are quite hard to find, but there's always these yellow cables indicating that there's one of the orbs nearby. Near the end of the game you can take a ladder up and find a room where a huge orb is hidden. This orb will remain closed before you can find all the smaller ones around the game. This light board on the wall shows which one of the orbs are still active and which are deactivated, also giving hints to where the remaining orbs are located. Most players will probably have a couple of lights left on this board when they reach this room, the most interesting one being seemingly near the start of the game. You see, there's a secret area in the middle of the cornfield where the small chicks started to follow you. You can open a hatch door there and enter an underground bunker. Inside the bunker you can find one of the orbs and this 3-directional mechanism that doesn't seem to do anything at first, but there's a closed round door next to it. After finding all the orbs and deactivating them, the huge orb will open up. You can now go inside it and there's something you can pull out of it. However, the player is not shown what that something is, but it's probably just another orb. After doing this, you see one of the lights on the light board light up, and it's the one at the secret bunker. When you head back to the bunker, now the 3-directional lever before the door actually plays different musical notes. In order to get the door next to the lever to open up, you obviously need to enter a specific sequence of notes. It took me shamefully long time to find out what to do here, but do you still remember the huge letters at the city area I said will be important later on? Well, now is the time. On the roof you'll see the letters R and C. Take the ladder down and there's one of the orbs there, but those who pay closer attention can also hear a device faintly playing a dark sequence of notes in this room. You also see that there's one of the letters that has dropped here from the roof, a letter E. With the letters on the roof this forms REC, short for record. And this is your first hint from the developers that you should record the sequence the device plays here, since it's the sequence you need for opening the secret door. This is not the only thing hinting at the significance of this room, because in the room where the huge orb and the light board is, there's a similar letter E in the background. Now you have those notes you need to play at the 3-directional lever device at the bunker, and if you do this correctly, you can finally see what is on the other side of the round door. After entering through the door and traveling through an underground tunnel, on the other side you find a room where a mind control helmet can be seen at the background, connected to a bunch of wires. Very interesting detail here is that when you do movements with the boy, a slight movement in the wires can also be seen. This alone is not why people think the boy is controlled by something, however. In the room you can pull a piece of the wall away and expose this thick cable sticking out of the wall. If you pull out this cable, you lose control over the boy and he will hunch down just like any other puppet, and the game will fade to black. This is widely considered the true ending of the game. So, the huddle controls the boy from the start but still decides to unplug itself from the network and just gave up, right? Well, people have theorized that the whole game is basically a test on the huddle, schemed by the scientists, and have been run many times before in different forms, which would explain all the destroyed abandoned laboratories, always ending up with the huddle being captured in the end and the new research laboratory being built, allowing the test to start again. Some of the things supporting this theory is the diorama we crash into during the escape sequence, that is an exact copy of the huddle's final resting place, hinting that everything we see is artificial and built by the scientists, even the outdoor areas. There's also moments where scientists basically help the huddle to proceed during its escape. The huddle finally pulling the plug on the boy would be simply explained as it finally giving up and deciding to end the cycle when it realizes it will never be free. It's a really good theory, but as I said, it has a couple of things that bother me. If the huddle was indeed controlling the boy the whole time, then it almost certainly cannot be the huddle that controls all of those puppets at the city section, since why would it use the boy when it can control hordes of puppets that could no doubt just charge the labs and free the huddle by force? Sure, the puppets at the city area were supervised by security, so has it already tried this before? It could be that the huddle wanted to sneak past the danger undetected by using the boy this time, but then comes the whole issue about the boy. He's clearly not a puppet, at least not similar to other puppets in the game. He breathes, visibly feels emotions, has intestines, and cannot withstand damage like other puppets. If it would be that the huddle could take control over humans, why wouldn't it just use one of the scientists to free itself instead? unless children are easier to mind control than grown-ups. If the scientists have planned all of this in advance, why is it all so messy and leads to so many casualties? To me, it just seems they are mainly improvising with the situation during the escape sequence. I can't explain this sinister moment here, however. I feel that the drowning scene hides a very important piece of the puzzle. Why one of the water creatures seemingly helps the boy while others just want to kill him bugs the hell out of me, but since I have no answers to that whatsoever, I'm not gonna tangle into that too much. More interesting thing about this part is the yellow substance that gets injected into the boy. The color yellow seems to be very important in the game. For example, mind control helmets glow yellow, the secret orbs are connected to yellow wires, and yellow light glows from inside these pods we see all around the game. One idea that I've thought around in my head is that maybe the boy actually did die in the drowning scene, and the yellow substance that was injected into him allowed the huddle or something to take control over him, and he was not granted water breathing, he's just simply dead, an empty shell. After all, it's not possible to enter the secret ending room without going through the drowning scene, so it would make sense that without the control of another entity, the boy just collapses, since he's dead. Maybe only the dead can be mind controlled. That would also explain why the huddle didn't decide, or rather couldn't use one of the scientists to free itself. But why can the boy still die from falling, for example, after drowning, if he is already dead? This little moment here where a puppet is seen mopping the floor before the boy gets close to it bothers me as well. Who exactly is controlling it before? Someone lower in the mind control hierarchy, perhaps? Also, if the boy was acting on his own will up until the point he drowns, why was he entering deeper and deeper into the dangerous facility? Was this really the only way to escape? But how did he end up in this mess in the first place? Or was he perhaps looking for something inside the facility? For example, where are the boy's parents? There's hints at someone spying on this mysterious organization. You can find developing photos of the huddle and puppets in a cage in the bunker. There's also freshly put out campfire near one of the orbs. What happened to this spy or spies? And did they set up the orbs, and for what purpose? It's possible that the boy was looking for these people before he drowned, explaining his motivations up until that point. Something that also interests me is the life cycle of the puppets. Were they originally normal humans, or were they artificially manufactured by the scientists, perhaps inside these pods? Water seems to be a crucial element for different creatures in the game. The parasitic worms are seen reaching out of the dirt and pig carcasses when it's raining, but the pigs indoors would seem like they are not infested by the worms. At least, they are not aggressive like the one that had worms sticking out of its rear end. The malformed bodies that also had worms sticking out of them hang upside down in water. Also, the long-haired creatures didn't want to leave the water either. Lastly, the huddle is also preserved in water and later captured in water prison again. Perhaps the creatures created by the scientists cannot survive long on dry land. By the way, those things hanging upside down in the water are also connected by their heads into mind control helmet looking devices. So another crazy thought would be that these things could maybe be acting as relays of sorts. Maybe the huddle is controlling them, and they are somehow signaling the mind control to the puppets at the city area. And perhaps the shockwave is used to push the mind control signal further through these devices, like the brain sends electrical signals to the muscles to allow us to perform tasks with our bodies. I don't know. I might be reaching a bit too much with this one. It's just so frustrating that I cannot figure out the point of the shockwave. Can it be that it's just there to make sure no unwanted people can get deeper into the facility? Maybe. I know I'm only asking more questions than giving out answers at this point, but that's how it is with this game. The worst and perhaps almost the most interesting thing about speculating stuff about this game is that there's not enough answers to support any theory out there. And I've seen people say Inside doesn't even have any sensible story behind it, but I won't buy that in a 3-hour game that was worked on for 6 years. Remember, this is the same development team that allegedly scrapped 70% of the content that was originally created for Limbo, just so that everything would fit better with the game's narrative. In an interesting article by Rock Paper Shotgun that goes deeper into the Inside's level design process, one of the devs states the following. The moment the antagonist's activities are revealed is purely about storytelling. It's a key point, a realization of what the boy is up against. It took about a dozen iterations to get the balance between explicitness and ambiguity. This sounds to me that the team gives a lot of thought on how much details of the mystery they want to outright show to the player, so it keeps the people guessing, but still gives them something to grasp on. In this, they certainly succeeded. The director of the game, Arne Jensen, has mentioned that he wasn't happy about how fast people found out some secrets in Limbo, so no wonder why the details of Inside Story are so shrouded in mystery. There's always some puzzle piece missing or something that I cannot explain, but somehow I know there's something more there. I really wanted to gather some of my thoughts about it anyways while doing a review, since I love endlessly theorizing stuff about this game. It was truly an amazing experience for me, and due to the vagueness of the crucial details of the story, it has spawned many different interesting interpretations. I highly recommend checking out the Steam community hub for this game, where people have found and gathered some amazing secrets that would take me another whole video to feature, but let me tell you, the game is filled with easy to miss hidden stuff, and some of the things that people have found when digging around in the actual game files suggest that there's still some secrets left to discover. Limbo impressed me, Inside even more so, and I cannot wait to play whatever Playdead's next game ends up being. Hopefully we don't have to wait another 6 years for that to happen though. Thank you for watching, and take care.